thing. Now, if you wanted to, and if this was going to be like some big involved piece of furniture, you could do components within components. You can nest components all the way down as far as you like. For most woodworking, you might get 2 levels in, but I mean, most of us, it's a drawer, it's the cabinet, it's the face. Like that's pretty much it as best as you can get it.
Can we name this component something?
Absolutely. So that was going to be my next idea, was to just go ahead and double click it, and you'll see it highlights so that you can rename it. We'll rename it side, hit enter, and you'll notice right here on the side, there's a little activate component that comes up if you hover over it. If you select the beer caddy, you'll see it's also called a component, even though it's kind of the parent component. But if you'll select that, it'll also activate that component. You can only have one component active at a time, even though you will see multiple components, multiple bodies, whatever else is on, sketches, whatever it is you have highlighted and is being shown will show up. However, you're only going to be able to work within one component at a time. You can obviously work within the overall component, which is the model that you're working on. You can do all sorts of really cool models and all sorts of work that you want to do there within that model, that component also. You'll also know, notice if you click on the drop down to the left of it, the little arrow, what we used to refer to as directories, but anyway. You'll also see it has origin, and you'll see that the bulb is shaded. If you click the bulb, you'll see what it is that the bulb is representing. So this bulb tells you that if it's lit, if it's yellow, it's lit, which means you can see it. If it is not, then it is not lit, it's shaded, and you cannot see whatever this object is. However, it is still there, which is kind of an important discrepancy to make. If you are doing a model that is specific to space, it is important to understand that even though you can't see something, it's still there. If you are, most of what modeling we are going to do is not going to be contemporaneously space relevant, so it doesn't really matter. So you don't really have to worry about a lot of that, but if for some reason you were, that would be the point at which to make it.
It's not spatial.
Spatial, yeah, it's very not spatial. There's a lot of spatial stuff here, but yeah. The other thing you can do, which I tend to kind of like to do these days because it keeps me honest, is we now have one component we know we're going to do. We're going to do a side. So because we're doing basically what is going to be a 3-dimensional and a 4-dimensional object, and I say 4 dimensions because we may split it into multiple objects. It doesn't get crazy. There's no advanced physics here, but anyway. I'm also going to reselect this, and I'm going to say, let's start mapping out what components we want. So we know we want a side. Let's also do a bottom.
Yeah. What we have to do is make a new component.
Yeah, but you want to make sure you're in the parent directory when you do that.
So I'm in the parent directory right here.
Yep. And you'll see the little black mark, the little bullseye beside it. I think it's actually called a radio button, but anyway. And then you just right click it and do new component again.
Okay.
So we did side, we did bottom.
And now this is going to be bottom, okay?
Yep. And we'll do one called front.
Okay, so we go back up to our here, and we click it, new component, we make a front. All right. Stop that. Hang on a second here, this thing
It's
is
fine. And you'll see it asks you for a version description. You can list whatever you want to list here. I'm just going to go ahead and say, components laid out. And that way I know.
all right.
And the next thing we're going to do is under the modify tab, which actually I need to see something here.
Modify.
Yeah. Ooh, I can't. Excellent. One of the things that is also really great about Fusion 360 that I enjoy a lot is you'll see that my toolbar probably looks a little different than y'all's. You can change your toolbar to what you want it to look like, what it is that you use most often. Change parameters is one that I use quite a bit, so I'm going to pin that to my toolbar, and you'll see it's just this little epsilon symbol. If you click on that symbol, either in the pull-down menu or if you have it on the toolbar already or whatever it is you're doing, hold on, let me make sure I saw.
Well, hey, let me catch back up with you.
That's
So
fine.
This was modify.
Yep, under modify, under the pull down menu at the very bottom is change parameters.
So, how do I bring it up to the tool?
Uh,
Click the little three dots.
Yep, there's a little
Gotcha,
ellipsis there to the right.
gotcha, right
Yep.
there. Okay, pin to toolbar, right
Yeah,
there.
and you don't have to do that. That's
Good, you got
completely
it.
up to you. I just have
That's
to use
good.
it.
That's
Showing
good
you how
practice
you
for me
can
though.
add other things to the toolbar.
Yeah,
Now, we're
exactly.
doing this, now my question is, what we're doing right here, I still have the front component active.
Yeah, it opens up this nice little sheet here that gives you favorites and model parameters. We're going to do user parameters.
Okay,
And this is going to allow us to add parameters. So Fusion 360 is called parametric design. This would be the part of parameter that it comes into. The very first thing that we're probably going to want to do is define our material thickness. So I'm going to call that.
now, I didn't get that
You go to modify.
Double click
Yeah,
on
I've
user.
got the,
Click on user preference.
click on user preference.
User parameters.
It's, or user parameters, right there in the middle of your screen.
A little plus
Double
sign.
click on it. Or click on the plus sign, I'm sorry.
Okay. All right, what do you now?
It should bring up your dialog.
Yeah.
And I'm going to call this material thickness. You can call it, stock thickness or stock or, whatever it is you'd like to call it. You can also use whatever unit you would like to. You can do no units, you can do lengths, whatever you're comfortable with, yards, millimeters, whatever. I tend to use millimeters just because everybody in the world does, so it just makes more sense. And it will also ask you for an expression, which seems a little odd because it's actually going to give you a value. However, you can define this particular number, this value, by a number of expressions. You can just enter in a number. If we call it 6 millimeters, you'll see it actually gives a value of 6 millimeters. But if I do 6 millimeters plus 9 millimeters plus 1/2 an inch, we didn't like that.
Is it because of space or something?
Maybe? That's a little weird. Usually it lets you mix cases. I guess it's not going to today. Okay, cool, whatever. But yeah, if you'll see, it actually gives you the value, the total value there.
What does that, I don't quite follow what that means. What are we,
It's a formula. Instead of typing
this
in a
is gonna
value,
be-
you can type in a formula.
So this is going to be the thickness of the stock that we're going to use to make our beer caddy. This is a double wall, and instead of doing any expression here at all, I can say 2 times material thickness, and when you start to type in what the actual parameter is, it'll go ahead and prompt you, do you want to use that user parameter? And I use 28 instead of a multiplier. There we go.
Okay.
But as you can see, it automatically updates the value here to 18. Now, you guys don't have to use that one. I'm just using this as, because we're not going to use double wall, but I'm using this as an example. Now, if I go in here and I change this to 50 millimeters, you'll see it automatically updates the value to 2 times 50, which is obviously 100. So that is the strength behind parametric design, is the idea that you don't have to change the entire design every time you just reiterate stock depth or screw size or whatever the potential variable number is. You can just do user defined parameters, change those numbers, and it changes the entire value. Now, having said that, you are going to make 147 mistakes. I guarantee it. I did it today. I had this week. I've redesigned that box that's out there, that giant 2 foot by 3 foot box. I've redesigned that thing 3 times because every time I've done it, I've done something wrong to where I can't just parametrically change the value. I did something based on something that wasn't based on the parametric number. I did something that was based on bodies, whatever. I screwed something up somewhere so that when I said, okay, instead of being a 1/4 inch, I need this 1/8 inch, and it just spit itself all to pieces and couldn't deal with it. It happens.
I guess my question is this. There's still some big picture part of this that I'm not getting. I understand what it's, is this a new?
Yep, new parameter. And all you gotta do is the same thing, just press plus.
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Let me say okay to this. All right, new parameter.
Mhm.
Under user parameters.
Oh, I see, we can create another one now. Okay, gotcha, all right, so what are we gonna call it? This is length. Okay.
Length, we're gonna call it 200 millimeters.
Okay,
And we're gonna do one for width.
this is gonna be millimeter, we're gonna say 200. And we're gonna call it width,
And it's gonna be about 130 millimeters.
and another one, huh?
Yeah, okay that, and then start another one. Length, or width, I'm sorry. $100. He didn't put a comment in there. You just okay that. And you might want to click your little arrow thing so you can see what you have created, and then click your plus sign again.
Okay, gotcha.
Next one will be tab length.
So the first one, the comment on the first one was thickness, wasn't it?
He didn't put a comment
You
in.
can put in whatever comment you want. I mean,
That was material thickness, so I'll just,
our parameters, and we have each of our components. We can go ahead and actually start doing some modeling. So we want to start with our side. We're going to go ahead and select it as our active component. And if you'll, left click on the arrow, it'll actually bring you down the drop down. And the first thing you want to do with any time you're doing any modeling is to go ahead and create a sketch for the component. Now, I'm going to tell you this, and it's going to drive you crazy, and no matter what, it's still going to drive you crazy, so feel free to completely ignore my ideas here. If you'll notice that the little cube up here at the top gives you all these really nice axes directions. I can tell you it is the bane of my existence. I don't know why it is that Fusion chooses the up, down, left, right, bottom sides that it does, because it is absolutely wrong almost every time I've ever used the freaking program. Technically, the front should be the top. The plane that they call front should be technically the top, because if you're looking down, Z should be the axes that comes at you, X and Y should be the plane that you're actually modeling on.
all right, so if I go to, that's given me some confusion
Yeah. Now,
already in the past.
so what I'm going to help you with here,
Yeah,
completely disregard the axes. They don't matter. It never has mattered. I don't know why they even bother labeling the stupid things.
Only until you want to render it.
Yeah, and even then, you can still change the axes, the plane. I mean, it really does not matter. I am sure that when Fusion and when AutoCAD released, the first thing we're going to draw is a rectangle, because rectangles are easy. I will also tell you, if you'll notice, it automatically snaps to the origin point. What it is doing when you do that, if you choose the origin point as your first point to actually start your drawing, it will automatically anchor to the origin. That's not that big a deal for most of what you'll do, but sometimes when you start to get into the parametric design, what is fixed and what is unfixed matters. So it's just something to be aware of. For most of what we're going to do, it's not going to matter, but just so you're aware of it, if for some reason you're trying to modify a parameter and it keeps telling you that it can't solve it, or if it says computation fail, almost every time that you get any warning from Fusion, it'll throw a little yellow triangle warning sign. And if you select it, it should take you to where the error is. Problem is, it doesn't tell you what the error is.
so you stare at it.
So you try to wonder what on earth you're possibly doing, because you keep doing the same thing and it keeps giving you the same error. I will tell you, with the parametric side of this, a lot of times it's because you have anchored a side that you're trying to change the dimension on. And so it doesn't know what to do, because you've told it this is always going to be 12 inches. And now you're saying it's going to be 12 and a half. And it just doesn't know what to do. So a lot of times if you'll select whatever it is that you're trying to change the dimension on and just right click it and do fix unfix, it'll unfix it and then you can change it. Sometimes to your own detriment, but there it is. So we're going to actually use the origin point because it's really easy. You can select this out to any size that you want, because it's not going to matter.
Rectangle? Okay.
Yep, 2 point,
All right.
just because it's easier.
All right. Oh, my origin point's not appearing here. It's, like, right.
It is just a square, or a rectangle rather.
Mhm.
So if we will press D for dimension, you'll see it brings up this nice little bracket, and it says select the sketch object to dimension. We're going to select this side, right click it, and it'll let you start entering in numbers. Now you can enter in just a raw number here, but since we're in parametric and we're trying to learn good practice, we're actually going to give it one of our parameters that we've already used. And I kind of screwed this up. Okay, cool. So,
We're gonna make that,
yep, right now you can just pull out the dimensions. I forgot about height, because we're going to need that. And the height needs to be,
I ended up making a whole new box right there.
that's all right.
I think you can you control Z to back out?
Control what?
Control Z, I'm asking Jesse, will that back it
You
out?
can try it, yeah, it should, but sometimes it also,
Yeah,
you
do it
have
one
to
more time.
like control Z a
Wait,
couple
so you
times.
know.
How can I delete? How about that?
Two
L for
lines, it
line.
doesn't matter where, just as long as they are perpendicular to the long side of your square.
Perpendicular to the long side, okay?
Uh-huh.
So we'll just do that right here, okay?
And if you'll notice, you'll know it's perpendicular
Wait,
because
you're
it gives you that
parallel.
little.
You said to the long side?
Oh, I did. I'm sorry. It parallel to the long side,
Okay,
perpendicular to
hang
the
on.
short side.
Let me kill this thing.
You're
right.
exactly right. I did that exactly backwards.
All right, so now let's just do this again. Line, and we're going to draw it right here, and we're gonna go parallel to it right here, like that. Okay, we've done that.
Okay.
Need a
And if
second
you will
line?
s-
Oh, we want
Yep.
another
You want
one?
two of them.
Okay,
Yep.
hang on a second, then we're gonna do another line right here. Thank you, Jared.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
Now, if you'll select both, what you can do is you can select the first one, and then if you hold Shift and select the second one, it'll select them both.
Okay, I got it.
And just
Select
press
that one, and then
X.
shift down here to there. Okay, we've done that, and then we're gonna do.
Press X, and it'll change it to a construction line rather than
Gotcha.
being an actual line.
Gotcha.
Construction lines are really handy for doing snap twos and for understanding kind of where it is you want. Actually, I did this wrong. That's okay. We're gonna fix it. You actually only need one of these. I forgot. Okay, cool.
All right, we're gonna make the bottom one go away then.
Yep. So you can just press. You can literally just select it and press delete, and it'll go away. So what we're gonna do. Oh, actually, do I want to do that?
It's not going away. There we go. We have to see. Here we go. Now we got it going.
I'm trying to think if I actually want to do it that way. I'm confusing myself because I was doing it a different way this week, working with something else. So let's actually do the two lines because that'll actually be.
All right.
All right.
Another line. Here we go.
There's lots of ways to skin this cat, but yeah, you want two different construction lines.
Okay.
You don't need to have them in any particular place because why did this not?
All right, now we've got two construction lines right here.
Oh, because it is parallel. Okay, never mind. All right, so we got two construction lines here of unverified and unsecured positioning. So again, we want to use D for dimension. And if you'll choose the top line and then the first line, construction line that we just made, you'll see it does the same thing. It brings you out this dimension. We can do some math here. If you use parentheses,
I'm not going to. Right.
that's fine. So you want to choose the top line
Okay, I've chosen the
Uh-huh.
top line.
and then choose the.
Oh, I've got a shift choose.
I don't think you actually have to. I think you can just choose it, and then pull it out to the side. Are you in the? I don't think you're in the dimension tool. So D for dimension. Choose that top one, then choose the bottom one. Yep. Pull it out,
Okay.
and it gives that to you. Now I use.
Thank you.
Whenever I start to do math with these, I always use the parentheses just so I can keep all my definitions and divisions separate. It does do math exactly how you would expect a computer to do math. So if whatever you put in the parentheses, it'll do first. Whatever's on the outside, it'll do in the regular order of operations. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do the height, and we're going to divide it by 3. And so what it has done is it has made this dimension, this part of this line right here, to be 1/3 of the line. I knew I didn't want to do it this way.
Alright, so height divided,
That's why I
height over
didn't-
3.
Okay, so,
Height divided by 3,
yep,
alright.
which is really cool, but I knew that there was a reason I didn't want to do it this way. Okay, cool. If you'll double click it again, let's do by 2. So we only want one line, and we want it to be exactly
Oh, we need
halfway
a
down.
space, don't we? But it wants space, it's height divided by 2.
Mhm.
Okay. And it still isn't accepting that. Let's see what. Height over 2. Do I need a space?
You misspelled height. You misspelled height.
Height?
Yep. Oh, no, I
No,
thought,
that's
no, I
right.
thought you did.
Well,
Capitalize.
I was about to say back it out, backspace. There you go. So type H, and now select.
It wanted a capital, I see.
Yeah.
There we
Just
go.
need to make sure
It
you're
wants-
in the right-
Okay, so
Yep,
it
yep.
wants verbatim compliance.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, and that's why I always select it when it comes up because it's
Gotcha.
easier than trying to
Okay,
type
so
it
there
out.
we've
yourself.
done that.
And delete your bottom line.
Yeah, you just want the one line. I forgot why it was we wanted to do that, but now I remember.
Go ahead and delete that. All right, you're gone. All right,
Yep.
interesting.
All right. So now what we're going to do. So what we have right now is just a plain box. We want to make a tab on each side to accept the other sides as they come together. So because of that, we're going to choose on your pull down of rectangle, we're going to choose center rectangle. And then we're going to choose the center point to be that center point that we just made. Now you also notice this little delta triangle beside it. What that means is that there is that should be the halfway point of that line segment, which we already know it is because we made it that line segment. So if you want to right click that, and it'll start pulling this really kind of neat rectangle out that is perfectly proportioned. And you can just, again, do what we did with the other rectangle, just right click it, and you can make it any size, it doesn't matter because we're actually going to dimension it again.
All right, so here we go. There.
All right, so if we choose D for dimension and we choose this long line, we can pull it out. It'll give us the dialog box again, and we can choose tab length for that length. And you will see exactly what I was talking about why it matters when you actually dimension something. So if I choose Control Z here, you will see that that moved. And the reason that's a big deal is because the entire sketch moved. It's not necessarily a big deal if you're just doing a couple of things because you don't really care where it is relative in space. However, if you're like me and you're doing a 2 foot by 3 foot piece that has 30 or 40 holes that all need to be perfectly apportioned, moving the background sketch matters. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to back out of that real quick. Just Control C a couple times. We're going to choose the entire piece. We're going to right click and say fix unfix. And what that is going to do is it's going to fix my sketch in space. Now you guys may not have this problem because if you have fixed yours to the origin point to begin with, your model's not going to move. I did not. So that's why I'm having to fix it now. And now that it's fixed, you'll see if I choose R for rectangle and actually pull it out again, when I go to do my dimension and do tab length, you'll see the model doesn't move. The sketch doesn't move.
Okay.
The only thing that moves is that line. So the way you know whether or not your sketch is anchored or not is if you are looking at it and it's blue, it is not anchored.
And it blew.
It is not fixed. If it is black, it is fixed. Which for us colorblind folks is still kind of a pain, even though it's black and blue.
Yeah, do we care about the other
Yes.
dimension on that?
The other dimension, we're gonna choose D.
Again, we're gonna go up to this happy top one right here. Click it, and then that's going to be.
We're gonna choose material thickness times 2.
Okay,
Now the reason we do times 2 is, remember, we centered that rectangle on the outside of our side. So that would be somewhere about here on what is gonna be our beer caddy. But because it's centered on that outside, we want it to be one material thickness in for the actual depth.
times 2.
So why do you, and never mind, I'll figure it out in a minute.
No, go ahead.
Why is it sticking out? So why is half in and half out?
Because we centered the rectangle right there.
Why not just do an edge there and just bring it in half the, or material thickness in?
So the problem that you run into with trying to make a rectangle that is apportioned to the center is the only centering command that Fusion has for rectangles is center rectangle.
Center.
Now you can make a rectangle, obviously you could just do a rectangle right here on the side, or you could do 2 rectangles and then trim them out and all that other kind of good stuff. But to be honest, what I have found is that when you do that, a lot of times you end up having to remake the entire thing. When you go to redefine that hole, like if this was in the center of this piece that was going to be a through, in fact we probably should do a center, but anyway, that was going to go through, what you'll find is that because you didn't center it on a construction line, it changes according to whatever start point you have. So if you chose that left top corner to start a 2-point triangle and then dimensioned it, it'll change based on that. It'll anchor that point and then change the others, rather than redimensioning everything along the line.
Okay.
I see.
Yeah, so like on that big box that I was doing, one of the problems I had, it's 2 foot by 3 foot. I've got supports that are on the inside of it. I need those supports to stay centered, but move in dimension.
Okay.
And you can't do that any other way than center rectangle, unfortunately, with Fusion 360.
Now, for some reason, this isn't taking, I've got thickness times 2,
Mm-hmm.
material thickness times 2.
Mm-hmm. So it doesn't like X. X is not times.
Oh, it wants an asterisk then?
Yep.
Okay, okay. Silly thing, there we go.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep. All right, so we're gonna do the exact same thing on the other side. I will tell you also, there is much more efficient ways of doing this type of rectangular design. You can mirror all of this stuff if you want to draw construction lines and use the mirroring effect and all that other kind of cool stuff. I don't typically do it because what happens is if I made a mistake on one side, it just compounds it to the other side. Whereas if I make a mistake once, I can just change it
So
here.
this is going to be a center rectangle over here.
The side rails that are going to go in.
Yep.
Okay. Do you want them to be exactly the same thickness?
I
Or
know,
do you
huh?
want them to be slightly thicker?
No, you want them to be exactly the same thickness.
Okay.
If you
Is there an issue with, because it's knocking it out?
So here's what I'll tell you, is that if you do your design to exactly what you're going to do and exactly what you want to happen, then when you go to do your CAM, that is where you start to take into account machine tolerances, material tolerances and all that other kind of aspects.
Okay.
Because when you go to, because what you want to be able to use your actual dimensions and your actual work, your sketches, your bodies, your entire model, you want that to be a model of what you want. If you start doing small material fluctuations and that kind of thing, it's not that big a deal, obviously, especially if it's just you looking at the model or just you and your team looking at the model. But if you're going to use best practices, you want to make sure that you're doing it being as exact as you possibly can.
So that which is knocking it out is going to be exactly the same thickness as to what it's knocking out.
Mm-hmm.
That was divided by 2, correct?
Now, will that eventually go away? Are you going to, or will those boxes always stay there like they are and just be referenced as this is going to cut
No,
out
they're
from
not the same.
Yeah, they will stay.
They will stay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. A lot of what I try to instill
It's
in you
not
guys when
like
you're
two,
doing
it's
these
just tab
is
link.
not
So just
just
double
how to
click on
get
that.
the job done, but also how to document your positioning of the job.
All right.
Mainly because like everything that you're doing, I mean, especially with digital design, the idea is that somebody can come behind you and do the exact same thing.
Alright, so if I'm doing, say I'm doing my thing, slightly different than this, I do it a different way. So if I were to bring that in, if I were to bring in the box and then
In the center point, same dimensions. D for dimension. Tab length. And then we're going to do 2 times the material thickness.
So the horizontal is,
Length.
Just double click on your number.
Oh, yeah. The horizontal for the tab is tab length. Yep.
tab length,
Yep.
and that was just simply tab length.
Yep. Just tab length. Yep.
And then the
so by running this on my Mac, I don't have the same keyboard convention that you do.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Because I don't have a right click. So I have to do like option click or something like that.
Okay. All right.
So that's, it doesn't matter. I'm following along
Okay,
exactly what
cool.
you're,
material
what you're
thickness times
Yeah.
2.
That is something that I kind of tend to lean on the Mac users about, is the fact that unfortunately I don't know all of their shortcuts and how to right click and all that other kind of stuff. So I have to assume that you do, hopefully.
Yeah.
And those look, so I've got
Look
the
good.
same box, only rolled 90 degrees. Good, okay?
Yep.
Yep.
Exactly. All right. So we're pretty happy with where the sketch is at.
So
So
we
what
need
we're
one
gonna
on
do-
the top too?
No,
Okay.
because the top is just going to be this line here, and it
Gotcha.
obviously doesn't need a reference point. Not
Right
this
there.
one. So we're going to stop that sketch.
We're gonna stop it.
And it'll just be upper right hand corner. It'll say stop sketch.
Got you.
And you will get this nice little non-dimension drawing of what it is you just did. What we're going to do now is we're going to actually extrude this into a 3-dimensional shape.
Well, wait a minute, let me see, I lost mine completely.
Okay, so if you look on the left-hand side on your tree,
Yeah,
make sure that sketches is actually turned on and that sketch 1 is turned on.
I don't see sketches even showing up.
I don't either. Did you delete it? Hit Control Z.
Control D,
Z.
Control Z, there it is.
Yep, so just hit stop sketch.
Okay, so we do that. I did that, and then, okay, that's better.
Okay.
So somehow I deleted it on accident.
Yep, it happens. All right, so now we're going to extrude this into a body. So what we want to do is we want to hit E for extrude, and it'll bring up this nice little dialog and ask you for the profile. The main thing to remember.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but on his, I see the origin for side 1, but I don't see the sketches for side 1 on that sidebar on the left.
Oops, sorry.
See what I'm saying?
That's because he's in front. See where that's the active component, is front. So if you'll select that little arrow and drop it down, you'll see sketches. Yep. Because you sketched all that in front. But that's fine.
Am I okay here?
Yeah, that's fine. So hit E for extrude.
Okay.
And anytime in any of the dialog boxes that Fusion 360 gives you, you'll see this little you'll see a blue dial, a little blue highlight, and that is telling you that you need to actually select something with your cursor. So we are going to select the interior of this sketch. Now you'll notice once we click that, it says, oh, okay, cool, I've got one selected. Now the next thing you'll see is profile plane. This will be your start. We're obviously going to start from where it actually is. And then you'll see direction. You can choose 2 sides or symmetrical or 1 side. We're going to choose 1 side. You'll also see an extent. We're going to choose distance this particular time. However, if you're doing a through hole that you always want to be a through hole no matter what the stock thickness, you're going to choose object, and then you're actually going to choose the far side of the object from the sketch. And we can go over that later, it's not a big deal. But and then for distance, we're not going to give it a number. We're going to give it our material thickness. because we want this to be the thickness of our stock, obviously. Maybe not obviously. And then once we have that and we're happy, we can just hit OK. And you'll see it gives us this really nice, clean looking body. Look at that body. You'll also notice that it automatically turns off the sketch because it assumes that you don't want to see all that clutter. If you turn the sketch back on, you'll see it. It's there. It hasn't gone anywhere. It is still there, and you will see that it only exists on the primary plane that you started on.
Gotcha.
It does not exist throughout the entirety of the body that you just made. Alright, so if we escape out, we can turn that sketch off so it's not as cluttered. And that is our side. Now obviously it is just a side, it is not both sides. However, there's this really cool function that you can do. If you just right click it, you will see move copy, and we can select move copy. You will also see that it says move object. We want to move component. We're going to choose that component that we just made. It also brings up all of this other really cool stuff which you can get into, but we're not going to. We're going to create a copy, however. If it'll allow me to choose it. Oh, okay, never mind. All right. So apparently we have to be back in the parent menu here. So if you go back to the parent component and then we do move, we want to copy that component, create copy, and then you're going to have to move it some. So we'll just move it over here.
All right, so.
And then hit OK. And we have two. And you'll see they both show up in the tree.
All right, you got ahead of me here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select this thing. And
First, you got to go to beer caddy up in the top.
Yeah.
That way you're selecting that.
Right. And then we were going to.
Yeah. So once
We
you're
were going
once you're in
Move
Beer
copy.
Caddy, okay. So
Yeah.
once you're in Beer Caddy, just push M for move, and it'll bring up your dialog.
Right.
And you want to select. You want to make sure this, where it says move object, you want to see make sure it says components. And there's a little drop down on the right hand side that has a whole bunch of options. You want components.
Now, hit create copy at the bottom.
Right.
Now select your actual object. Hold on. You're still active on your, you gotta go back to beer caddy.
Well, all these are active, are they not?
No.
Because we've got these. Oh, no, no.
The
no,
only
I
one you
got
have
it
active
here.
right now is
It's the
front.
right
So
here.
you need to
That
be
was the
active
problem.
on component.
That's what I did wrong.
Yep.
Okay. I need to do this. There we go.
And then right click it, or actually, yeah, either way. So hit escape. All right. So now press M for move.
Now we want
Yep.
component.
We want to say
over
component.
here, and
Yep.
then we want.
Select that,
We want select. And then
And
we
create
want
copy.
Create copy.
and it's going to ask you to move it somewhat too. So just grab it right there by the center.
Right here.
Yep. And just hold it and drag it to somewhere clear of the other one.
All right.
Yep. And then press OK.
Good. Thank you.
And if you'll see, it shows up as the second of whatever the component is that you just made.
Very good.
Yep. So we're going to do the other sides very much the same way. Let's do the front next. So if we click on that as the active component, you'll see that the other components are still there. You can still see them. They didn't go away.
You've already got your front done, so you need to select side instead, or rename your front as side and rename your side as front. But because you were active on front and not side, you created your front to be his side. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you just select your side now instead of front. There you go. Now you're in the same spot as him. Just understand when he's talking front, you're talking side.
Yep. But you'll see that those two pieces are still there. So to get rid of them so we don't see them and we don't confuse ourselves, all you have to do is just click the little light bulb beside the one that you don't want to see anymore. That easy. And just like before, we're going to choose sketch, and we're going to create a sketch. And again, it doesn't really matter which plane that you want to sketch on. I'm going to continue to sketch on this one.
Well, didn't we just
Go ahead and unselect. So you unselected front 2. Also do the same thing for front 1. Click the light bulb on front 1. You're on side. Go down to front 1. That's front 2.
Hold on a second. I need to,
My TA.
Yep. Click on the light bulb next to it. There you go. Now on side 1. There you go. Now click on the radial button to the right of it. There you go. Now go to sketch. Rectangle.
okay. And this is
2
gonna
point.
be a 3 point.
2 point. Okay.
All right.
All right.
So you got your rectangle?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So we're gonna do the same thing again. We're gonna do D for dimension. We're gonna pull out those two dimensions. And then we're gonna define them. So we know this one's gonna be height. And we did length last time, so this is gonna be width. Perpendicular to each other for our halfway points. So just pick any spot, go ahead and draw your two lines. So we have that nice little intersection, and then select both of them. Press X to make them construction. And we want to do the same thing we did before with whatever your parameter is divided by 2 as the dimension for the centers. One of the things I really don't like about Fusion is for some reason it won't let you just mass select stuff to do the same dimensioning on. It's kind of aggravating, but whatever.
Yeah, something happened right there. Okay. What happened was, now let me see, there's a way that I can extend that construction line, right?
There is, or you can just completely redraw it, I mean, because you're just going to dimension it anyway. And just like before, we're going to do E for extrude. But this time we're going to select the interior as well as the tabs. So if you'll see, we're going to choose the tabs all the way out
Wait a minute, I lost
as well as the interior,
And not the bottom one.
and not the bottom one, because we're going to make the bottom all positive.
something's
Okay.
making my
All
thing
male.
disappear here.
Gotcha.
So
selected, which will be the one center one here in the center, as well as each of these little rectangles, which are actually one big rectangle. I don't know why it separates it out that way, but it does. So we're going to say OK, and you'll see we have this neat little tool, this neat little body again.
Oh, well,
With-
this is
with
not,
the
I'm
proper
gonna say
scale
okay yet.
to go to the side.
Yep.
Okay.
So on your distance,
It's like I was.
you change are you changing the distance, right? Material thickness?
Yeah,
Okay.
distance should be material thickness.
Say okay. All right. Okay.
Now, if we go up to parent caddy, it'll give us all the bodies. You'll see that these are overlapping. That's not really a big deal, primarily because what we're seeing is basically just a graphical representation of things. It's not actually what's real. So what we can do, since we want to kind of see it, what it looks like assembled, is we can move some of the bodies around. So I'm going to choose components. I'm going to choose M for move, just like we did before. I'm going to choose components. I'm going to grab this one. I'm going to move it out here to the side somewhere so we can kind of see. And I'm going to choose capture position. When you capture position, what it means is it's going to leave it there. Because if I don't choose capture position and I just leave it here and I close out the model and I come back to it later, it will have moved it back to where it was. So I'm going to do that again so that it actually captures the position. Oh, it actually needs me to move it somewhere. Okay, cool. All right, there we go. All right, cool. So I've moved it, and you can see if we look in three-dimensional space, these are not aligned. They don't look like anything. Nobody would care what they look like. No one would be able to represent, to figure out what this is actually going to be. So we're actually going to move it around a little bit. So I'm going to choose move, and you guys don't have to worry about this. If you don't want to mess with this, don't worry. This is just so I can show you how everything looks when it gets put together. So I'm going to choose this particular model. I'm going to rotate it, and I'm going to rotate it around this axis. I'm going to choose 90 degrees. It really doesn't matter which direction of 90 degrees because it's not going to matter in a minute. We're going to choose OK. All right, now then, we're also going to move it again. So now I'm going to choose this component, and now that I'm perpendicular to this point, I'm going to move it so that you can see what it's going to look like when it actually combines. So again, we're going to choose capture position, and if you'll see, I chose point to point here for the move, and I'm going to choose this interior point here to this exterior point here, which is not quite right. Okay. I'm going to deselect both of those. And let's do this instead. So let's do origin point. Let's do this interior point here and this point here. And that looks better. Okay, cool. So now we'll say OK. And if I deselect it, you can see that they actually fit really, really well together. So if we do side 2, you can actually turn it off and on and see. Now, I will tell you, there are going to be times that you will do this exact thing and you will look at it and go, oh, it looks great, except there's like a double strike here, like on this corner. And what it is this particular tab crosses over somewhere. And if you were to shade one out, you would actually see that it's actually crossing over. I can probably do that in one of the sketches to kind of show you.
So in other words, you've got all your dimensions wrong?
Yeah, and that's exactly what's happened is that you made one dimension too long or too short, whichever way,
Right.
and
There's
now
either
it's
gonna be a
overhanging.
gap. There's either going to be a gap or there's going to be a little going into it,
Yep, exactly so.
and you're going to have to get a chisel out if you want to fix. If you want to.
Yeah, I'm the right one. All right. Let's rotate it here. Capture position. 90 degrees. We're gonna do the same move. And trying to remember which way I'm going.
Oh, you can't. You're at an angle where you can't see the 2 points you want.
Yeah, but that's actually not too bad. So I want this origin point.
So you can do it.
It says no. Oh, because I didn't have it selected. Okay, cool. Let's try this again. Oh, because I'm still on rotate. Okay. Origin point.
Not select the one at the bottom. That
You
one?
mean like that one? Okay.
And then,
Nope.
no, not the outside.
To the left.
inside.
There you go.
There you go.
I don't think that's right.
No?
No, we're overlapping.
Oh, I see. I thought it would, oh, I know why, okay.
It's because it's material thickness out.
Right. Okay, I got it. Yeah, I know, it's, you gotta do.
Oh, wait. And that's why I was saying, you know, you guys don't have to mess with this because this is literally just how it looks, so you guys can see
All
it.
you're trying to do is just kind of like put it together so it's at the.
Yep.
No, I did the same thing.
Well, I did the same thing. That's, I'd love to blame the PC for this one, but this one was mine, you know. So actually, I'm going to.
It's a picnic.
I'm going to leave it where it's at right now, and then I'm going to move it from there. Okay, cool. So we're going to do move again. Went the wrong way there somehow.
You gotta do the out.
Remove so I can get some perspective here. Oh God, I forgot to capture the, and that's what happens when you forget to capture the position. Capture position, okay, cool. Move this one, point to point. This point should be, oh wait. Nope. Point to point. Move this one, select the point, so that point.
No.
Wait, right?
No.
No, it's the other one. You select the same one.
Ah. Backed up too far. Selection, here. Point to point.
Alright.
Origin point.
Select
That one, and then this one. There you go.
There you go.
Hey! Look, 4 of us can do it. Hey,
There you go.
there!
We can put that puzzle piece together.
Alright, so now that we have this together,
Right.
you can see how they all somewhat start to fit together. The
Right.
bottom would actually be this shape here with these cutouts
With
already
four,
cut
with
out.
four little tab cutouts.
Exactly. We could still do the same if you wanted to make sure that all your pieces fit together and you wanted to be able to do a render. A lot of times I just do like 3, especially if it's a fully symmetrical box, I just do 3 sides. We all know that it has 6 sides. Ta-da. You know?
What does a render do?
So if you had a product that you were going to like try to show off and you actually wanted it to say look pretty, we could go up here.
We're gonna shade it.
Yeah, first what we're going to do is we're going to save this because we haven't done that in a minute.
You can either shade it, you can map some artwork to it.
Yep, exactly.
And you could put the label on it and
So let's see what it does
Do
for
whatever it
render
is.
if it's just sitting the way it is. Yeah.
and that also
Gotcha.
it also has a light source, so it's going to show you where the shadows are going to be. Just giving you all the extra wonderful little things to do.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. Ow.
Do rotation on it.
Very cool.
Yep. And that's just literally, you just change it. The other thing that's really, really nice about this, so if we do change our parameters, if I want to change my parameter now to 6 millimeters for the thickness, I hit OK, you can see it's changed. Now, obviously it hasn't changed terrifically because I assigned these to be at certain points that are no longer connected because of the way it moved. But they are still correct. So I can, you know, move this point. We can do that same point to point. If I change,
Oh, I see what it did. Okay.
Brought it in instead
It brought
of keeping
in
it out.
because it was keeping the 2 points together.
yep, exactly. So if I
Okay.
do, because I
Because
captured
of the way
position.
of the way you did it in capturing the position.
So if I do a recapture, you can see that it actually is still correct. This.
How did you uncapture them?
You don't, you recapture it again.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so if I do point here and point
Yeah,
here,
I see.
capture position, okay,
Now they all lock in
they all lock in again.
back where they're supposed
So I have,
That's why I made that point to you guys about even when you see your model and you go, oh, this looks like garbage, it's all overlaid and everything else, doesn't matter. A lot of times when you come back, like if I come back later, if I haven't saved this correctly or often enough, I'll come back and these will all be laid flat and up against each other and everything else, and you've got to remove them because basically this is just the graphical representation to you. The computer still knows, like if you go to change these sketches, the sketches don't move with the body. The sketches are still on the same plane that we sketched them at.
Okay.
However, the change in the graphic is exactly the same. So even though we just changed it to 6mm, and you all saw it, change the actual dimension of the thickness and the dimension of the tabs and all that other kind of good stuff that it did, it still made those changes to the body as the body was already attributed and captured. So it's smart enough to know that, hey, I changed that, but it's not going to change the plane the sketch is on. The sketch is still on that same plane. If we show that plane, you'll see that this one is on this side, that one's on that side. Let's see if we can see the sketches here. Those sketches are there.
In relation to the piece, the sketches are still there in relation to how the piece is all set up.
Exactly so.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right. Which is how when I brought my Illustrator file in, I did a mistake.
Things to close out real quickly because we just don't have enough time to go through the rest of the stuff. So I will show you the incorrect way to make a body to work. So if we wanted to do this bottom, what I could do is I could select the bottom. Now I'm active in the bottom. We can choose to create sketch, and I can actually sketch on. If it'll give me that pointer face.
Oh, point to point to point in and around.
So if I chose the bottom of our object to actually do our sketch on, and then I choose rectangle, 2-point rectangle, you can snap to that point on the other sketch or on the other body. It will let you reference that without projecting through. So if I choose that, and I choose the entire side, and then I just do extrude, so you always have to re-include the sketch surface that you started on. I'm going to choose material thickness again. I'm going to say OK. And then if we constrain orbit up, you can see that is on the bottom. Now, in order to make these tab cutouts, what I can do is I can select that. And keep in mind, this is really not the best way to do this. However, if you don't mind doing a one-off project, this is perfectly fine and it'll save you a lot of time. We choose that same component. I chose move. I'm going to choose the origin point to be this point here. And then I'm going to choose the target point to be right there. I'm going to capture the position. Now you can see all this overlap. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use create. Actually, no, it's under modify. We're going to do combine. Typically when you think combine, obviously you think putting two things or more together. You can actually do a cut using combine also. So the target body is going to be that bottom piece that we just made. The tool bodies are going to be all of these pieces. For some reason it takes that other one out. I don't understand why. Okay. But we're going to make this not an intersect. It's going to be a cut. We're not going to choose a new component, but we are going to keep the tools. We're going to say OK. And you'll see that overlap is not there anymore. Now I need to do another cut real quick because it didn't get that other side. So again, we're going to choose this as the tool body, or the target body. We're going to choose the tool body as this other side that didn't cut last time. We're going to cut it. We're not going to make this a new component, and we're going to keep tools. So we're going to say OK. Now, if you look, getting hung up on the table. If you look, that looks really good. Obviously, it doesn't look good enough because we don't have that other side on there. If we had the other side on there, we could have done all four at the same time. Now, if we move that body now, that component, let's just do a free move so we can see it.
It is all correct.
Yep, it is exactly correct. Now the problem with that is because it is not a sketch, it is not going to be responsive when you change the material thickness parameter. And that is what is going to screw you over if you're trying to iterate this on multiple thicknesses. So be aware you can do it if you need a quick one-off. Bang, you're done. I mean, you saw that it was like 5 seconds.
Can you bring that into a sketch?
That's what I was about to ask. Can you do like a sketch and then dimension it?
So what you can do is you can do create sketch. Where am I at? Oh, wrong side, wrong object. I want to come down here to bottom. So if I create sketch, I can actually choose that plane, and then I can sit here and draw it all out and then dimension it. You can do that. That's
okay.
fine.
You would have to redraw it. You can't say take this object and make it a sketch, but you can. But because you have everything there, you could literally go from point to point to point to point and draw it out.
Exactly.
And then bring it back and extrude it.
Yep, and then delete that body and then extrude it, and
then you're fine.
Yep, and you would be fine.
Okay, all right.
And that's certainly an option. On the other hand, it's also a little, it's probably just as time consuming as it would be to have done the sketch properly to begin with. Which is what you could have done right here. You could have just drawn this out as a rectangle and then notch these in and notch this in, and you would already know exactly where it's at because again, you can see it highlighting behind it. I mean, it's there. You can mess with it. You can, dimension off of it. You can, draw points in and everything else. So could be a time saver, could not be. It just kind of depends. It also, it also doesn't help you for positioning and some of the other stuff. But if you need it to be really quickly done, you're done.
I have a question that I kind of want to follow up on something that he asked earlier, and you addressed it.
Yeah.
And that's about assuming tolerances. If you're going to put two pieces together, how much should you allow for tolerances? And you answered, make them the same.
Yep.
But now I tried that on a piece that I printed plastic. Okay, and it was PLA.
I wish I could give this guy $20, like personally, because he really does an amazing job. Something that you guys probably saw up here that is not on yours anywhere in your toolbar is this really cool add-in is called map boards. And map boards, if you don't know what the add-ins and scripts are, they are available to you in the Fusion 360 App Store for the most part. The App Store will bring you up all this, really kind of neat stuff, and you have to kind of know what you're looking for. Map boards is one of the most popular ones. If I can spell. So if we look for map boards, it actually brings you this up what exactly you're looking for. Like I said, you can see it's $2. I did spend both dollars to buy the piece of equipment. I think he gets $1 out of that. Like I said, I really wish I could hand him $20 because he really does an amazing job. But to install it, it's pretty simple, especially on Windows. I don't know about Mac, but on Windows, it's literally a self-exporting exe, so it just automatically installs.
Most of it is
great.
Just put it in where it's supposed to.
And he's got in the read help document, he's got instructions on where to load it, depending on your operating system and all that other kind of good stuff. But what this does is it takes the bodies, not the sketches, but the bodies that you already have set up, and it exports them as a DXF function, which is really cool because what it does is it basically, like it says, it maps the board that you're going to cut out based on the bodies that you already have. So I'll show you how that works. So I'm just going to click map boards. It'll actually bring me up this nice little dialog box. You can ignore so it bases the material off of whatever the material is that you've chosen in Fusion 360. I think Fusion defaults to steel for some reason, and I can't ever seem to figure out how to change the lumber and all that other kind of good stuff. So it doesn't matter what the material is. Oh yeah, it's telling me that's not correct because
you need to put it on a piece of wood that's going to be at least big enough to cut it out.
Imagine that. It would have to be over 0 width and length.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to assume it is a 3x3, or actually I think it's a 5x5 piece of bolted birch. So under options, it gives you all these really cool options. You can include bodies, and I don't remember exactly what that deal was, but since I do most of my work out to the laser, I use sketch output to DXF, which is what I'm supposed to choose. You can also set up a laser curve. You can set up all this other stuff.
What's the curve?
So the width of the cut.
Okay, that's what I figured.
So yeah, just like with a saw blade, whatever the thickness is of the saw blade plus whatever the waste is on the sides and that kind of thing. It gives you a unit type. I chose millimeters because I continue there. Component spacing, it actually defines the space between the cuts allowed. And it says saw blade or router bit, you know, whatever you're going to use. I haven't really messed with the rest of this. You can save a cut list. If this was something that you were actually going to design to cut out on, say, an actual board, you know, if you were doing just regular no joinery to it and you were just cutting lengths of board, you can save that cut list, export it, hand it to the guys at the furniture shop, and they would be like, okay, I'm going to cut you these boards. And it'll export all that. It'll also allow you to either label or not label the components. It also asks you for your map orientation. I always choose Z up because, you know, I'm that way. Let's see. All right. So if we choose OK, it will go ahead and do its thing. It's going to ask me where I want to send it. I'm going to send this actually to my desktop. I'll say save. And it takes a minute. So the reason I had to get another laptop is because when I got to this point, it would force close Fusion. It just refused to do it on anything, hardly. It's a little bit of processor memory. You'll see that it added another component called map. If we choose that one, and let's turn the rest of these off so we don't see them. Too close. There we go.
There's all your pieces.
Yep.
Okay.
So there is all our pieces. Now, this is, oh, I'm on the wrong side of it, that's why. I'm on the wrong side. No, I'm on the wrong side. Hang it. All right, back around again.
It was just upside down.
Yeah, okay, cool.
All right.
So there you see, since I chose to label it, it actually gives you a little label that tells you which body each of these is and what their size is, which is kind of handy if you don't have a frame of reference on like what your actual board length is and all that other kind of good stuff. But you'll see it is also only two-dimensional. So this isn't exactly great for the CNC. However, it is what it is. It works terrific, obviously, for what we built today. Since we don't have any pockets or anything, it'll work terrific for that. The other thing that we can do with this, if we were going to cut this out on the CNC, is, as we were talking about, trying to make room for these pieces to go together with a round bit and square holes is kind of a pain. So what we can do is we can go up here to this other add-in, which actually is free. It's called Dog Bone. Oh, dang it. That was trying to...
And it takes into consideration.
Exactly so. Why is it not? Anyway. So what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to add dog bone fillets on the inside corners. So instead of the router just coming along this side and then coming down and leaving a little rounded piece here that's half the radius of the actual half the radius of the bit. Yeah, half the diameter of the bit. Instead of leaving that, it'll actually cut in enough that another piece would actually be able to fit into it. And of course it does that all mathematically and everything else. And I haven't used it actually yet, so that's why it is I'm not messing with it right now, is because it's probably going to require some sort of setup. However, if we take this over to CAM, now once again, we haven't done anything. We're just flipping workspaces over to CAM. So here we are in CAM with that one piece that we're going to cut out of a piece of wood. Now, if you'll notice, I didn't choose all of these other bodies because I don't care about those. Those are just the representations of the model we're going to make. So, yep. What I want is the piece that we're actually going to cut out. And so, okay, let's do 2D because that's all we need. We're going to do adaptive clearing. We need to select a tool. I'm not sure I actually have any tools loaded. Okay, cool. So there is some stuff. Let's choose a little 1/4 inch flat. Now, if you'll notice, this is already a setup. One of the reasons that I don't take you guys through actual CAM and help you out, like to actually make CAM in here, is if you'll notice, that is an actual digital representation of what the Tormach head actually looks like. And that's because Fusion actually takes into account what the head looks like, as well as how much tool stick out you have, all that other kind of information in order to make its tool paths. 90% of the time, it does not matter. It just doesn't, because you've got a 3-inch end mill and you're cutting 1/2 inch into the board. More than likely, if you have any stick out at all, it's not going to collide with anything, so it's not a big deal. However, because you can do multi-axis processes on this thing, it assumes everything. So we're going to say okay to that, because why not? So we selected that tool.
Is that going to adjust the position of those?
It should. We're going to disable the coolant. We're going to leave all the spindle speeds and everything, because we don't care about all that stuff. It is what it is. We can go to the next, which is geometry. Right now we have no pocket selections selected, but you can see you can do all sorts of cool pocketing tool paths. Closed, open face, closed face, adaptive, non-adaptive, and this is just the 2D adaptive options that are available to you. We're going to choose stock contours here. We're going to choose. Oops.
Yeah, you don't want to cut the.
All right. Pocket selected. Okay, cool. So that's geometry. Heights, that's what we want. Okay, cool. So retract height, you can set this. This is going to be how far the tool comes up off of the work after it's done. We're going to say 10 millimeters, that's fine. Retract height, we'll say from the stock top, we're going to say 5 millimeters, stock top 0. Bottom height, I think I actually don't have to mess with that. So we're going to go on to the next tool path. Passes. Now here's where you get into, here's the tolerances, your optimal load, if you can cut both ways, what your minimum cutting radius is going to be, all that kind of good stuff. Radial stock to leave, we're not going to leave anything. Feed optimization. I don't think the linking actually had anything to do with two-dimensional.
So that's still just a 2-dimensional DXF file that you brought
Yeah.
into CAM.
Yeah, exactly.
Because of this particular thing, we don't care. We're just gonna, we have like 1/2 inch stock, and you're gonna get a blade. You're gonna get a bit tall enough to cut through the whole thing, and so it really doesn't matter for the dimensional part of it yet.
Yep.
Okay.
Model bottom.
Okay.
That'll be it. It still had to be a pocket, really. See if it does it that way. Alright, it should give us a tool path. Yeah, so here is your setup. This is what we selected it to do, which was a 2D adaptive. It is 80% done with trying to figure out which end is up on that, and now it's giving me some sort of warning. Empty tool path. Okay, cool. Alright, so I didn't do it right. However, when you get done, what you're going to do is you're going to go up here to actions. You're going to go to post process. God, really? Alright.
Because it doesn't like a tool path.
Yeah, apparently it didn't. Alright, so I got that. Let's just say that one then. Should overcut. I know I didn't select a pocket, you jerk. Sure, do that. Let's see if it likes that.
Well, you don't have a caution.
Not yet.
Oh, it's still doing.
So we're going to delete this one out. And this one we will view the tool path. So here it actually gives you the English translation of the actual G code. And then if you see, it's going to clear all this out because, again, I did this backwards apparently somehow. But if we go to post-process, should be ShopBot tools. And I thought there was an option for it should ask you for one or the other. And I don't remember if I already set this up. That may be why it's not asking me for it. But there are two different file extensions that ShopBot actually generates. One is for the older machines, one is for the newest generation of machines. You want the file extension that's going to leave you a .sbp, which of course is ShopBot actions process. Let's see. I'm gonna again go to the desktop. I'm gonna call this one Beer Caddy. And I don't know why it's showing it to me because I don't care. But it will show it to you apparently.
All the coordinates that it's gonna.
Yeah. And so you can see it's there on the desktop. Now if you were to take that over to the ShopBot, you would still have to set up the ShopBot just the way you always do. You have to touch off on the top of the equipment or on the bottom of the equipment or the top of the stock or the bottom of the stock, whichever one you're going to use. All that kind of stuff you already set up in here in Fusion 360 on the cam. So you still have to do all the hardware work. However, it is going to use that hardware work that you just did, and then it's going to use the G code that you're feeding it to actually do the cut. So you saw I said on one of the options, on one of the options on the 2D adaptive, there is a height here. It's going to ask for the bottom height. What it's asking is where the end mill is going to stop. And I had selected the stock bottom. I think I actually said model bottom. Either one will work. Stock bottom is fine in this case. And then I also chose a -3 offset. And what that should do is it should actually go 3 millimeters deeper than what the actual stock bottom is. And of course, the reason for that is to make sure you can cut all the way through, taking into account some variance in the wood and all that kind of stuff. But that is how you can go directly from the CAD that you're doing in the model and going straight down to CAD. The other thing that's really pretty handy here is if we turn this back off, if we were to make a change in any of this, in fact, let's remove that. One of the nice things about map boards is it bases its parameters and its cuts off of what is active. So if I deselect, or what is showing, I should say. So if I deselect the side and, well, we don't have anything for handle yet. If we deselect those two and I rerun map boards,
It's only going to do the two.
it'll only do the two.
Sweet.
Yeah, so you can see now it only did those two.
Cool.
And then if you, again, go back over to cam,
And then bring it into cam.
yep, you're back and it's throwing an error because it's like, hey, all that stuff that